We begin the Gemara today towards the bottom of the Vav Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom where it says Va'oisei tefach heichon mamidoi. This is explaining the opinion of the Chachamim that said in the Mishnah that the number of walls that you need for a kosher Sukkah are 2 full walls and a 3rd wall which is a tefach. Va'oisei tefach. So that 3rd wall which is a tefach. Heichon mamidoi. Where do you position that tefach? Amarav, so Rav said, Ma'amidoi keneged hayotze. You put it opposite of that wall that is coming out, that ends, that comes out. That's where you place that tefach. So you can see over here in the Rashi, there are 2 different pictures. We have 2 walls. One wall is on Mizrach, one wall is on Safon. So you could put that tefach either sticking out from the Mizrach wall or sticking out from the Safon wall. Dr. Gemara, Amalei Rav Kahana, V'Ravasi l'Rav, Rav Kahana and Ravasi said to Rav, but there's a better position to put this tefach. V'Yamidenu keneged roish tor. Why don't you put it diagonally across both of these walls together? In the Gemara that I have over here, there's a picture for this. There's a few different opinions in the Rishonim or in the Mefarshim, according to Rashi, what the pshat in this is. Well, over here in the Gemara, they bring the picture of the Maharam, which is the most accepted opinion, I believe. What Roish Tor means, that instead of positioning this tefach continuing from one of the walls, position it across both of the walls, diagonally across them, and over there, place it diagonally, so this will create more of an enclosure than just putting it continuing from one of the walls. So it's much better to put it over there. So, Shosik Rav. When Rav heard this question, Rav was quiet, he didn't respond. So the Mefarshim discussed why Rav didn't respond, and most say the reason was Rav held it's not necessary, and he didn't see any credibility to the question, so he didn't even respond to what they were asking. If you look in the Gemara that I have here, there's a picture of the Marshal, and he says that Roish Tor means that you're placing that tefach also continuing from the wall, but instead of continuing it from the wall straight, it should be diagonally because it creates a little bit more of an enclosure. Okay. The Gemara now continues and says, Itmanami amashmo mishmei de Levi mamidoi keneged hayotze, that you place that tefach opposite one of the walls, coming out from one of the walls, like Rav said. This is the way it was taught in the Beis Medrash. You put that other tefach opposite one of the walls, coming out, continuing from one of the walls. Absimin, the Tamer Rab Yeshua ben Levi Omar. So either Absimin or Rab Yeshua ben Levi said that no, we have to be more stringent about this. So first of all, this tefach should not just be a regular tefach, but it should be an expansive tefach. Usually a tefach is you hold your fingers together. So there should expand and open his fingers and create an expansive tefach. So it's really more than a tefach. And then, where do you put this tefach? And position this wall within 3 tefachim of one of the walls. And we have the rule, anytime you have a opening which is less than 3 tefachim, it's like it's closed, it's lavud. And therefore, if you include that area which is just under 3 tefachim, and then this expansive tefach that you're placing here of a wall, together you're going to have a wall of 4 tefachim. So the milah of that is, as Rashi says, the length of a wall of a sukkah, minimum length, is 7 tefachim. So positioning it in this way, you're going to have together a wall of 4 tefachim, the majority of the length of the wall of a sukkah. So therefore, there's a much bigger advantage in doing it this way. So the 3rd wall is not just 1 tefach, but including lavud and this expansive tefach, you're going to have 4 tefachim of a wall. Rav Yudah said, Sukkah ha'asuya kamovoi. If you have a sukkah where the 2 walls are not connected to one another, like we had before, Mizrach and Safin, or let's say Mizrach and Darim, but you have 2 walls that are across each other, like a mavoi, like an open mavoi, like an open alleyway where you have 2 walls across each other. It's going to be kosher, also with this additional tefach that you have to place there, a 3rd wall as a tefach. But now, in this case, v'oisei tefach, this additional tefach Mamidoi l'chol ruach sheyirtze. So in Rav Yehuda's opinion, you can place that additional tefach on whatever side you want to place it to add that additional third wall. That's Rav Yehuda's opinion. Over here, Rav Yeshua, Rav Simon, Rav Yeshua ben Levi, again, Rav Simon or Rav Yeshua ben Levi are more machmer, and they say that in this case, what do you have to do? Pas arbo mashu. You have to make a board, in other words, a partition, a wall, that is going to be wide, 4 tfachim, and a bit more than 4 tfachim. Umamidai bepaches mishleisha samach l'dayfen, and you place it within 3 tfachim to the wall. Now, so you have together, what do you have over here? Within 3 tfachim, so there's lavud. L'chol paches mishleisha samach l'dayfen kalavadami. Within 3 tfachim of the wall, it's like it's closed up. That's the halacha of lavud. So over here, what do you have? You have just under 3 tfachim of lavud, and then you have this this board that's 4 tfachim. So together, what do you have? You have 7 tfachim of a wall. 7 tfachim of a wall is the minimum size that you need for a wall. So it comes out that this third wall in this case is really the full size of the minimum shiur of a wall. So now the Gemara asks on this, what's the difference here? Why in this case are we being more machmer? What's the difference that previously, when we were speaking about a sukkah that had 2 walls, not across each other, 2 walls attached to each other, like Mizrach and Safan. The Ka'amrit, that you said, Sagit tefach shoichek. So even Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi or Rab Simon said that it's enough to have an expansive tefach within 3 tefachim of the wall. And what's the difference that here, when you have 2 walls that are across each other, the ka'amrid by pasar ba, that over here you need a board that's 4 tefachim wide to create the minimum measure of a wall of 7 tefachim. Why over here are we being machmir to have this minimum measure of a full wall? Answers the Gemara, it's different, because Hassam, the Ikishtei, the Fanais, Kehil Chassam. Before, since we're talking about 2 walls, 2 full walls that are touching one another, and you can't go through them, so therefore, it's enough to have 1 tefach sheichik, the way I explained it before. Sagile tefach sheichik. Hache, the Leke, Shtei, the Fanais. Over here, since you don't have these 2 walls that are together with each other, they're across each other, and you can walk straight through these walls. So therefore it's not as good. Only if you put up another partition of 4 tfachim within 3 tfachim, so that you have lavud as well, it works. But if not, in this case, it doesn't work. So over here, the position of the walls is not as good as in a case where you have it, the 2 walls that are attached to each other. Now, we bring another opinion regarding this, and there's a few ways how to interpret what Rava said. So now Rava said, the only way to be matter, so according to Rashi, this goes back to the case where you have 2 walls that are attached to each other, Mizrach wall and a Tzafon wall, and now you want to have a 3rd wall of a tefach. That 3rd wall of a tefach is only going to work if you're going to make it in a tzuras pesach. What is a tzuras pesach? When you have a pole on one side, a pole on the other side, and a pole above it, creating a form of an opening, of an entrance, of a tzuras pesach. So, as Rashi explains, this halacha l'meisha misinai that said that the 3rd wall could be a tefach. Yes, it could be a tefach, but that tefach has to be divided, half a tefach for 1 pole on one side, half a tefach for a pole on the other side, and then on top, a kaira to create a tzuras pesach. That's the only way how you can be mater a sukkah with the 3rd wall in this shape of a tzuras pesach. So usually, the chiddush of this Rashi here is, usually tzuras pesach does not require to have any thickness to the poles on either side of the tzuras pesach. Here, however, Rashi says, Rava is not negating the halacha l'moshe Sinai that it has to be thick a tefach. He's just saying that you divide that tefach, has to be a half a tefach on one side and another half a tefach on the other side. Okay, this is Rashi's pshat in the Gemara. There are some other Rishonim that say that Rava is speaking about the case of a mavur, when you have the 2 walls that are across each other. Here Rava is saying that you need the tzuras pesach. Iked others said a different version of what Rava said. Amar Rava v'niteres nami b'tzuras pesach, that you can be mater also with a tzuras pesach, meaning you don't have to have a tzuras pesach. You could have the tefach like it was explained before, and as we'll see soon in the Gemara, what it means to say is that Rava would agree to Rab Simon or Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi that you can have that tefach that expansive tefach that's removed from the wall just under 3 tefachim, and combining with lavud, you have 4 tefachim of a wall. You could rely on that, but then Rava adds another option. Besides that, you can also create the Tzuras HaPesach, and that would work as well. That's the second version of what Rava said. A third version, Ikidamri Amar Rava, that Rava said, Tzricha Nami Tzuras HaPesach, that you're going to have also a Tzuras HaPesach, meaning the only way to be matter these 2 walls is if you have both together. It has to be what Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said before, an expansive tefach within 3 tefachim of the wall to create that lavud of 4 tefachim. In addition to that, you also have to create a tzuras HaPesach to finish off this wall, to have this 3rd wall. So you need both together. Ravashi Ashkechel Rav Kahana. Ravashi saw Rav Kahana the Ka'ovet Tefach Sheichik, that he was building the 3rd wall, and he made it like Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, this expansive tefach within 3 tefachim of the wall, and also the ka'avet tzuras HaPesach. Sorry. And in addition, he was also making a tzuras HaPesach. So he had both. Amalei, so Ravashi said to Rav Kahana, do you not agree to what Rava said? The Amar Rava. Rava said, V'niteres nami b'tzuras HaPesach, that you could be mater the 3rd wall by creating a tzuras HaPesach. In other words, the version of Rava that he had was that Rava was saying that you have a choice. You can either put the tefach sheichik, or you can put a tzuras HaPesach. So he was asking Rav Kahana, why are you making both? The tefach sheichik and the tzuras HaPesach. So he answers him, Amalei, ano ki idoch lishne de Rava svirli. I'm holding like the other version of what Rava said. The Amar Rava said, Utzricha nami tzuras HaPesach. That it's necessary to have both. You have to have the tefach sheichik, like Reb Simon or Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, and in addition, you have to finish it off with the tzuras HaPesach to have a full wall there. That's the halacha according to Rav Kahana. Okay, so the Gemara now comes back to the Lashon of the Mishnah. So what did it say? Shtayim kel chasan. That for Sukkahs, for the mitzvah of Sukkah, it's enough to have 2 walls, and the 3rd wall is just going to be a tefach. Amar Rava, so on this Rava said, V'chein l'Shabbos. And so too, we can use these 2 walls with the 3rd wall, the tefach, on Shabbos. Meaning, if it's Sukkahs and Shabbos on Sukkahs, so migu the havya doifim the inyan sukkah, since it's considered to be a proper wall for sukkah, havya doifim inyan Shabbos, we'll consider this to be proper partitions for reshus hayachid for Shabbos. So the chedesh here is, even though usually the halacha of a mechitza for Shabbos is more stringent than the halachas of a mechitza for sukkahs. On sukkahs, as we see, you need only 2 walls and another tefach, but on Shabbos, you have to have 3 walls to create a reshus hayachid, 3 full walls to create a reshus hayachid. So having 1 tefach should not work for reshus hayachid and Shabbos. But on Sukkot, there's a migu. Since this wall is considered to be a full wall, the halacha l'Moshe Sinai says that tefach is considered to be a full wall for the Sukkah, it's also considered to be a full wall for Shabbos. As the Ran explains, you can't have a mechitza halfway. If we consider it to be a mechitza, it's considered to be closed off. And therefore, if l'gabe sukkah we applied halacha l'Moshe Sinai that it's a mechitza, it's considered to be a mechitza for Shabbos as well. And there's a machlokes in Rishonim whether this is true even regarding the Isser Minat Torah to carry in Reshus HaYachid. From most Rishonim, it's mashma that this is even regarding the inyanim of Minat Torah on Shabbos. If it's a mechitza for Sukkah, it's a mechitza for Shabbos. The Pnei Yeshua, however, says, is medayik from Rashi, that this is only regarding midrabana. But Minat Torah, this migu will not work. Gemara continues, brings a braisa, Eis ve'Abaye. Abaye asked Rava from a braisa, Miyam lina migu. Do we say migu? Do we apply the same leniency of Sukkah for Shabbos as well? But for Tanya, we learned in a braisa, Doif in Sukkah, kedoif in Shabbos. The halachas of the walls of a Sukkah is like the halachas of the walls of a Shabbos. And what we're talking about over here is regarding the leniencies that we find regarding the Sukkah, regarding Shabbos, that is, the Gemara is going to bring over here, that you can put up reeds, surround the area with reeds, and that could be a good mechitza for Shabbos. You can use the same reeds as long as you don't have space of 3 tvachim between them, so it's lavud. You can use those reeds as a mechitza for sukkah as well. But ubulvad, unless only shalayehei ben kana lechaveira shloisha tvachim. There shouldn't be space between one reed and the other 3 tvachim. So then it's lavud. You say Shabbos al sukkah. Then there's another stringency, however, that Shabbos has more than Sukkah, than the mechitza for a Sukkah. Shabbos ein niteres elo ba'oimid beruba ala poretz. Shabbos, you can't be matter to use the partitions for the Rishus HaYachid unless the partitions that are standing are more than the breaches that are open. Masha'en came the Sukkah, which is not the case when it comes to a Sukkah. If you look at all the 4 walls of the Sukkah, and you see that there's more paratz ala oimid, there's more open than enclosure, it's going to be kosher for a sukkah. That's how Rashi teaches this Gemara. Oimid beruba ala paratz refers to looking at all 4 walls together, all 4 sides, and if it's oimid beruba ala paratz, or even if it's paratz beruba ala oimid, that is, it's still going to be kosher. So now the Gemara says, Rabbi's question, what do you see from this braise? My love, don't you think the pshat on this braise is Yisera Shabbos this Sukkah, a Sukkah. That there's a chumrah regarding Shabbos, and that's even a Shabbos that falls out in the middle of the Yom Tov of Sukkot, more than what's required for the walls of a Sukkah. And even though it's on Sukkot, nevertheless, I still am more machmer for the requirement of the wall for a Shabbos more than the wall for Sukkah. And I'm not going to say that, since this is a good wall for the Sukkah, even though it's paratz meruba ala oimid, it should also be a good Sukkah, a good wall that is for Shabbos, even though it's paratz meruba ala oimid. So here in this braise, I see I do not apply the migul. The loy amrinu migul. So the Gemara says, loy, that's not the pshat in this braise. Rather, Yisera Shabbos the alma al Shabbos the Sukkah. What this braise is saying is, any other Shabbos of the year, where there is no migul, it's not Sukkah, so you're not making it a kosher schach or a kosher wall that is for Sukkah, so then there is no migul. So then, regarding all other Shabbosim of the year, you have to have oimid meruba ala paretz. So that's a bigger chumrah than if it would have been a Shabbos in the middle of Sukkot, or really any partition or any wall used for a Sukkah, where over there, even if it's paretz meruba ala oimid in all 4 walls of the Sukkah, it would be kosher. So therefore there's no raya from this braisa. But the Gemara asks, if that's what this braisa holds, that we do say the concept of migul, that if it's a good wall for a Sukkah, it's going to be a good wall for Shabbos. So we should be able to apply this migul also in the reverse. And why would the braisa not say this chiddush as well? If so, listening nami, let the Braisa say as well, Yisera Sukkah the Alma, there's a bigger chumrah, and by Sukkah, on a regular day of Sukkot, as Sukkah the Shabbos, more than when Sukkot falls out on Shabbos. Why? So there's a certain leniency that we could apply from Shabbos, from the walls, from Shabbos to a Sukkah. What is that? Sukkah the Alma, usually by a Sukkah on any day of Sukkot. As we said before, according to the opinion of Rab Simon or Rab Shua ben Levi, boy tefach sheichik. For that 3rd wall, you have to have an expansive tefach that's within 3 tvachim of the other wall in order to create the proper partition for the 3rd wall. That's on a regular day of Sukkot. But v'ilu Sukkah the Shabbos, but on a Sukkot, on a day of Sukkot that falls out on a Shabbos, loy boy tefach sheichik, you should not need this expansive tefach. And the sagi belechi, it should be enough to have just a thin little lechi, a thin little pole to create that 3rd wall. Why? The ha'at hu the amrit, because Rav himself said, what happens if you place schach on top of a mavi? So a mavi is the 2 walls that are open from both sides, and you went and you placed schach on top of this mavi. Sheyesh loy lechi, and this mavi has a lechi, a pole, at one of the sides of one of the openings, kosher. It's going to be kosher. Even though usually for Sukkot, that lechi, that's not a tefach sheichik, not an expansive tefach, is not going to be counted as a 3rd wall. But since for Shabbos, that lechi is considered to be an enclosure on the 3rd side, on that opening. So if it's good for Shabbos, it's good for Shabbos, it works for Sukkot as well. That's what Rabbi said. So therefore, if so, the Braisa should have said this halacha as well, that sometimes you apply the leniency of Shabbos to Sukkah. that you can use this lechi as a third wall. So the Gemara answers, here the Braisa did not have to say this halacha. Why not? Because hashte mikilta lechamirta amrinon. If we applied the migul to take the leniency from Sukkah to Shabbos, even though usually the requirement of a mechitza for Sukkah is more lenient than the requirement for Shabbos. By Sukkah, you have 2 walls and a tefach. By Shabbos, you have to have full 3 walls usually. Right, so therefore, we nevertheless, over here, the chiddush was that we applied the leniency from Sukkah to Shabbos, that it should be a good wall. So if we say the migu in that direction, so mechamirta, lekilta, lekol shekain, to apply the halacha of Shabbos, which is usually more stringent, to Sukkah, which is more lenient, for sure you should apply this halacha of the lechi regarding Shabbos to Sukkah as well, that it should work on Sukkah that falls out on Shabbos. So therefore that halacha did not have to say clearly in the Braisa, itself understood. This is Rashi's pshat in the Gemara. According to Rashi, this Braisa here, or this piece of the Gemara here after the Braisa, was speaking about a mavoi that was open on both sides, and you have a lechi on one side. But Tosfos on Amud Beis disagrees, and Tosfos says we're talking about a mavoi that's closed on 3 sides, only open on one side, and the schach was placed on top of this mavoi, removed from that third wall that's there in the back. And that's the discussion here. But if it would be open through and through, then the Gemara would not apply this leniency from Shabbos to Sukkah, because even by Shabbos, it's only according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, and we don't paskin like Rabbi Yehuda. That's Tosfos' pshat. Talk to Gemara, Gufa. So here, let's take a look again at this itself that Rav said, applying the leniencies that you find by Shabbos regarding mechitzas to the Sukkah. Omar Rav, so Rav said, Sichech al gabe movi. You place this chach on top of a movi sheyesh lo lechi. And this movi has a lechi at the third side, at the opening. Ksheida, so it's going to be kosher. If it works for Shabbos, it works for Sukkah as well. Ve'omar Rav, and Rav said as well, or some greatest rabbi by all of these cases in the Gemara here, as the Bach brings. You place schach on top of the double boards that you put by the corners around a well of water. We had this before in the Gemara. There's a halacha regarding a well that you have in the middle of a Reshus HaRabim, and you want to draw water out of it. You don't want to take it from the well, which is a Reshus HaYachid, into the Reshus HaRabim. So you can put at each one of the 4 corners a board that has a tefach going on each side. So that will make it into a Reshus HaYachid. If you place tzchach on top of that, ksheida, it'll be kosher. Since these are good partitions to create a Reshus HaYachid for Shabbos, it's also good partitions to create the walls of a sukkah. Even though without this, it may have not been kosher for a sukkah, as we had before in the Gemara. So now, the Gemara will explain why Rav had to say both of these scenarios, even though it's the same point, that we're using the mechitza of Shabbos for sukkah. Now we have to say both of these. The Yashmina Mavoi, if we would just say the case of the Mavoi with 2 walls and a Lechi, there you have 2 proper full walls. So to use those walls of Shabbos for Sukkah is not as much as a Chiddush. But Avogabe Pasibirois, the Lekishtei, the Fanas Maliyasa, here by the Pasibirois, you just have these double partitions at the corners, a tefach going on each side at the corners. So maybe at that far I don't go, I don't apply the Mechitza of Shabbos for the Sukkah. V'yashmin and Pasibirois, on the other hand, if I would say that we apply the Mechitza of Shabbos for Sukkah, in this case of Pasibirois, I would say you have 4 walls. Yes, small walls at the corners, but you have 4 walls there. But if you place chach on top of a mavoi, the lekesham arba defanis, you don't have 4 walls. You only have 2 walls. Eimeh lois. I would say maybe you should not apply the mechitza of Shabbos to work for the sukkah. So therefore, it has to say both. The Gemara continues now. V'i ashmino and hanach tarti. And if we would only say the halacha of migu regarding these 2 cases, that I apply the migu from Shabbos to Sukkah, so then I would say mechamirte lekilta. You apply the migu that if it works for Shabbos, which is usually more chomer, where the requirement of a mechitza is more, and this still works for Shabbos, I could apply this to Sukkah, where the requirement of a mechitza is less, only 2 walls and 1 tefach, so I can apply the migu in this way. But to say that if you have a wall that's kosher for the Sukkah, by having 2 walls and a tefach, to apply that back to Shabbos, that it should work for Shabbos, which is more chomer, then maybe in that direction, I would say maybe you do not say nigud that it should be kosher for Shabbos. Therefore, tzricha, that's the first case that Rabbi mentioned, that if it's a good mechitza for Sukkah, it's a good mechitza for Shabbos. Sagt the Gemara, it's in the Mishnah. V'shechamasa merubah mitzilasa psula. If you have a sukkah that the sunlight is more than the shade, so then the sukkah is pasul. When it says that there's more sunlight, it means looking at the schach, the shade and the sunlight that you see on the ground of the sukkah. From the schach, there's more sunlight than shade. But we're not concerned about the sunlight that enters into the sukkah coming through the walls. If you have very flimsy walls, or you have walls that have a lot of openings in it, we just learned before, you could have a lot of openings and you have a lot of sunlight, that doesn't matter. What we're talking about over here is as far as the shade that is provided through the schach. Rav Yeshi, this reason says, Af machmas defanos. Even if there's more sunlight, and the sunlight is coming from the walls, it's also an issue. My time with Rabbi Yoshia, what's the source of Rabbi Yoshia's opinion? Because the pasuk says, the pareiches that's separating between the kodesh and kedashim should cover between them. So pareiches mechitzihi, the pareiches is a partition. The kakarye rachmane schacha, and the Torah refers to it as v'sakaisa, as a schach, which is like a roof. So why does the Torah use the term v'sakaisa if it's a partition? So therefore, from here we learn out alme mechitze kischach be'inam, that the walls of the sukkah have the same halacha like the schach, that it also has to provide shade. And if you have flimsy walls that don't provide shade, it's going to be a problem, just like if the schach is not chamas and merubah mitzilasa. That's Rabbi Yoshia's opinion. There are some Rishonim that actually take it a step further and say that according to Rabbi Yoshia, all the halachas that pasul a schach apply to a wall of a sukkah as well. Just like the Rashi said in the beginning of the Masechta, the name of the sukkah is al shem schach. According to Rabbi Yoshia, the walls of the sukkah are also called sukkah, the sakaisa. So therefore, all the psulim apply to the walls as well. But others say that no, he's learning out specifically benegay to this halacha of chamasa, merubah, mitzilasa, but the other psulim of the schach do not apply to the wall. The Rabbanon, how did Rabbanon interpret this word v'sakaisa? Why did the Torah write v'sakaisa here? The pasuk is writing that the neichov beipurte the mechzik is chach. That this partition between the kodesh and the kedashim should be tilted a little bit at the top, in order to create a little bit of a roof to cover over the kapaitis there, the aron and the kodesh HaKadoshim. So it looks like schach over there, but it's not teaching me this halacha that the walls have the halacha like the schach. Amar Abaye, and Abaye said, Rabbi, v'Rab Yoshia, v'Rab Yehuda, v'Rab Shimon, v'Rab Gamliel, u'Bei Shammai, v'Rab Eliezer, v'Acherim. So all of these Tanoim, the 8 different Tanoim over here, they all hold that sukkah diras kva be'inam, that the sukkah, the structure of the sukkah, has to be a permanent structure, has to be built in a way just like in a house that you live permanently. The sukkah has to be also built in this way. And the Gemara is going to bring the sources of all of these Tanaim, one of them being Rabbi Yoshia that we just said, and therefore the Gemara is bringing this here. But as Taisus points out, each one of these Tanaim says a different halacha. That's not, they don't all agree to each other in the halachas that each one of them are saying. All the Gemara is trying to say is the basis of the halacha that each one of them said is based on this concept of diras kva. But that requirement of diras kva, each one requires something else for it to be a diras kva. But they don't agree to each other as far as all these requirements are concerned. So the Gemara starts with Rebbe. The Tanya we learned Rebbe said, Rebbe Yoim, kol sukkah shem ba'arba amas al arba amas. Every sukkah that's not the minimum size of 4 amas by 4 amas, psula, it'll be possible. And the reason is, teishvu means you have to live in the sukkah, diras kva, like your house. Nobody lives in a house that's less than 4 amas by 4 amas. Rabbi Yoshia, chodamaram, Rabbi Yoshia says you have to have a diras kva, so that's what we just said. It's not enough that you have shade from the schach, but you also have to have proper walls. If you have very flimsy walls, and therefore it's full of sunlight, so therefore people don't live in such a house. So therefore, it's not good for these walls as well. So that's the basis of Rabbi Yoshia's opinion. Rabbi Yehuda holds has to be a diras kvadit nan. The first mission, Sukkah shigavoy l'mayla m'chof ameh psula. A Sukkah higher than 20 amos is possible, but Rabbi Yehuda says it's kosher. So according to Abaye, the reason why it's kosher is because even though it's a diras kva, nevertheless, it's kosher because the Sukkah could be a diras kva. Rab Shimon's opinion is that Tanya Rab Shimon says, Beis kil chosan, and the Gimel afilu tefach. So the Tanakama says, like what it said in our Mishnah, that the walls of the Sukkah are only 2 full walls, and the third one is a tefach. And Rab Shimon and the Gimel kol chosan, vidal tefach. You have to have 3 full walls and a 4th wall of a tefach. And the basis of his opinion is because of diras kva. Rashi says, this is only according to Rav Masnas Pirish before, that says that you learn it out, v'sukkah til etzel yoimam, and michayrev, that the sukkah protects you from the heat and from the cold and so on, and therefore the walls have to protect you. According to that opinion, Rav Shimon's basis is that it has to be a diras kva. Rabbi Gamliel, where do we see Rabbi Gamliel requires a diras kva? The Tanya we learned in the Braisa, you build a sukkah on top of a wagon, or on top of a boat. So then Rabbi Gamliel paisel. Rabbi Gamliel says it's possible. Rabbi Akiva says it's kosher. So the reason why Rabbi Gamliel says it's possible is because a wagon riding around is not a permanent place, and the same thing on a boat, where Rashi says it's very windy and the wind will blow off the sukkah, it's not permanent either. Beis Shammai, where do we see Beis Shammai says it has to be a diras kvad? It's nam, we learned in the Mishnah, Mishoy, Reishoy, Verubay, Besukkah, Vishulchane, Besech Habayis. If your head and most of your body is inside the sukkah, but your table is in the house, Beis Shammai poislin, or Beis Hillel machshirin. Beis Shammai say this is a pasul sukkah, and Beis Hillel say it's kosher. So we had this before in the Gemara. The Gemara explained they're not only arguing about how you fulfill the mitzvah of sukkah, but they're also arguing about what's the minimum size of a sukkah. So why does Beis Shammai require to have the table inside? If you are inside the sukkah, you're eating here. The table has to be the minimum size to have a table inside in order for it to be a diras kva. Rabbi Eliezer, where we see Rabbi Eliezer says at diras kvad, it's nam, because we learned in the Mishnah. You make your sukkah like a tzrif, meaning that you don't have walls and then a flat roof on the top. Rather, you have walls and roof that come together. And Rashi said it's like a beehive, which is sort of round, and the walls round out at the top. And it never you don't have a flat roof on the top of it. That's the way Rashi describes it. Other Rishonim describe that kamin srif means that it's like an opposite V shape that comes together to a point on the top, and there's no distinct roof that's flat on the top of it. That's a tzrif. And then oishe samcha lekaisel, or you put schach leaning it on the wall. So Rabbi Eliezer paisel. In these cases, Rabbi Eliezer says it's possible. If you she'ein lo gag, you don't have a distinct roof. The roof, which is the schach, and the wall are together. So you have to have a wall and a roof separately. The Chachamim say it's kosher. So the Gemara is explaining the basis of Rabbi Eliezer's opinion is because it has to be similar to a diras kva, permanent structure, and people do not build a house this way. You have a roof and you have walls, and the same has to be with a sukkah. Achedim, finally the last opinion, Achedim, they say the Tanya Achedim, sukkah ho asuya kishavech, a sukkah that's made like the shape of a shayvech, of a nest of birds, which is made round, as Rashi says. So you don't build 4 walls or two walls in a tefach. You're not building it in a square. You're building it round. Psula. That sukkah is possible. The fi she'ein lo zodius. It does not have the corners of the shape of a square or rectangular sukkah, and therefore it's going to be possible because a house, a diras kva, is not built this way.